Today we're going to be working on a 2016 Land Rover Range Rover Sport. We're going to be installing the V-line, so we'll be taking out the radio behind here and the display. So the first step will be removing this piece of trim here. We're going to be using a pry tool for this, and we're going to start over here. And we're just going to pry in this corner and pull it up. You're going to want to work your way across all the way over here. And once you get to this side, you need to pull on this bottom part. You need to pull it down instead of out like the clips up here. For that, we're going to drop the glove box so we can get underneath this. And then you can see those here, how we've got the clips that are vertical that we pull out this way, but these are the ones that are up and down. And then the ones over here are just standard where you pull out. Now that this is out of the way, we'll move on to taking out the radio next. So next we'll be removing this piece back here. To start, we'll just take off this rubber top. And from here, we're going to remove these two 8mm bolts. Once those are removed, we can remove this front piece of trim right here. And there's going to be one plug on the back of here if you have the heated seats in the rear. That'll be this plug right here, the clip on the bottom. And this will pull out, and from here this silver piece will pull out as well. And the top part pulls up like that, and the bottom will pull out. And now we can move on up to the front seat. The next step will be taking off this silver trim right here. And to do that, we're going to take our pry tool on this far side and lift up. And then slowly work your way down and pull this way instead of pulling up to get this final corner out. We'll do the same on the driver's side over here. And now we can move on to taking out the radio and the display. Alright, so next up we'll be taking out the radio down here, which will be the 8mm here, and the same on the other side. Alright, and from there we can pull this out, and there's going to be one connector on the back right here. And that's the connector here. It's upside down in this plug, so the clip will be at the bottom. And that's the clip here. And now we can pull this out of the way. And we're going to have two T20 Torx bits, or Torx screws, that'll be holding in the radio. Alright, so the two Torx are right here. And now we've got the radio removed, and we can move on to the display next. Alright, so we're taking out the two screws up here on the passenger side, and there'll be two on the driver's side that hold in this metal cage. Once all four of those are removed, this cage will just pull right off. And from here, we're going to have two that hold in each of these button panels on the driver and passenger side. Once those are removed, you can just pull these off and set them to the side for now. And then we'll have 4 more that hold in the radio. Once those are removed, we can go ahead and pull out the radio. Alright, so we're going to disconnect all these connectors back here. And we'll put this to the side now. And to pull the radio out, you'll just pull on it. There's 2 tracks that it's on, and the connector here for the button panel's kind of in the way, so you kind of have to pull this corner over it, like that. And then from here, we'll be disconnecting all these connectors. And now I've got the radio out of the way. Alright, so we're ready to make our connections behind the radio and display now. We're going to be starting with our main harness here, the MCF LR2B. We'll be connecting this big connector behind the radio. And then the other harness that'll connect behind the radio will be our WL VOL USB. This end will go to the V-line, and this end will plug into the back of the radio. We'll be leaving the factory USB connector, this one right here, disconnected, so you can just leave that one to the back, and this will be taking its place. From here, we're going to route this up towards the display along the side here, so we can make our other connection, this one here, behind the display. And once we get to this point, we're going to pass these all the way through to the top as well. And then we'll be connecting these here at the factory display connector. And then this one will connect into the display itself. And that leaves us with this right here, which will go to the V-line, and we'll be routing this behind here to the glove box itself. The last connector to connect is the GBMF here, and this end will go into the V-line. These 2 ends here will connect here. So plug into the female, and then this will be going into the display itself. And the last thing we'll be installing back here is the GPS antenna. You can also put this on the dash, but we're actually going to be installing it right behind here, just like that. So we'll take the adhesive off and go ahead and get that stuck in there. Alright, so the next step to remove the glove box will be pushing in these clips right here. It's going to be one on either side, and it's just this hook that holds it in place. Once you've done that, the glove box will drop, and then we can run our wires through along the top. So we're going to be running our wires through the glove box now. We've got the GPS ran through here, as you can see. We're going to run the rest through to follow. And if you just push it through to about like right here, you can feel it with your hand. If you push your hand up through this side, there's plenty of room back there to feel it. Since the WL-VOL USB does not plug in to any of the harnesses that are behind here, make sure you do run it when you run all these cables to the glove box. So we've got everything ran here. Decided we're going to mount the V-line up here against the wall. And in this case, now that we know where our wires are going to go, we're going to pull all this extra slack right here up behind the radio and then zip tie it all up or test tape it up. And we'll come back from there and show you how to reinstall everything. Alright, so we've installed the V-line here. We've actually used this clip here that's part of the glove box to hold it in place. As you can see, it's firmly in place, but if we pull this up, we can get it out. This worked out really well here. We did have to use some felt tape to kind of make it a little more secure in here, but you can use it without that. From there, we just routed all of our cables right through here and up and through the top hole where we pulled them through. And then we test taped them all together on this side, so everything closes smoothly and reopens. So we're ready to connect everything at the radio now and start reinstalling everything. So we're going to start plugging in the radio. Don't forget this connector down here needs to stay out of the way. This is going to be for the controls that go up front, so we'll leave that sticking out. We're going to start with this connector here, which is from our main harness. And then we'll do our other one. Push all these out of the way. There for the display. And that'll be this one here, the WL-VOL USB. And this is the factory connector. It's very similar to our GVMF, but the GVMF goes behind the display. And then from here, we'll connect all of the factory connectors back. And this one back here is the factory WL-VOL USB type cable. This one will be left disconnected, so we're going to leave that down there. Alright, so now that we've got everything connected here, we're going to put the bottom two pegs, these here, of the radio in place at the bottom. And then we're going to put it down at an angle like this and push it back, which will get it over this harness on the bottom. And from here it should seat into place. And now we'll move on to the display. Alright, so now we'll connect the display here. We're going to start with this connector here, which is for our main harness. And then we'll be connecting all these plugs here. And this is our GVMF cable right here that'll be plugging into the back of the display. And now we can put everything back into place here. And we're ready to start screwing both of these in. So we're going to start with the radio down here. We're going to put in the 2 Torx screws. And from here we'll move on to the display. We've got 4 Torx screws here, 2 on each side. Now we're ready to put these button panels back on. These harnesses back here, you might have to stuff them back in a little bit where they come from. And then you're just going to line up the pegs. And then we'll put in the 4 screws that hold those in. And once those are in place, we'll move on to the metal cage. So the metal cage will go in this orientation here. There's some text at the top that's right side up, so you can use that to tell, or you can just line up the holes. from here we'll be putting in the 4 torque screws that hold that in. And next we'll be putting the button panel in place. So I need to connect this connector here, goes in upside down. And once that's in place, this will just slide right over. And we're going to line up these 4 here with the bolt holes. And next we'll put in those 8mm. Now we've got everything put back in, we just need to put all the trim in place. So we're going to start with these trim pieces down here on the center console. We're going to put the top part in first by the radio. And you want to push that into place and then work your way down towards the very center of the console to snap this down in place. And now we'll move on to the passenger one. We'll start with the top part first again. And you want to make sure you push down on the back as well, and then it seats into place properly. And once we've got those in place, we can move on to the back. Alright, so the last part we'll be doing back here will be this piece of trim goes on top. And this plug right here, we do want to make sure that it's out and open. And then once the top slides in place, you'll feel it click down, and then the bottom just gets pushed in. Once that's in place, we can put our 2 8mm bolts back in here. Next, we'll be putting on this panel here, and if you do have the heated seats in the rear, make sure you plug this back in. We're just going to line this up and push it into place. There we go. We should feel all the clips pop into place once it's fully in. And the last piece we'll be putting in is a rubber piece. And that just pushes in on the back, and then the bottom pushes down. Now we can move on to the trim up front. So ready to put this trim back in. The first thing I would always do before you put it back in is just make sure all the metal clips are in place and they didn't get stuck in here. If they did get stuck in here, make sure to pull them out and put them back on the trim. Once you've done that, this will just set into place here. There's going to be the 2 longer pegs by the display. You want to make sure you line those up correctly or it won't sit down. Once you start to push it into place, as long as it's lined up, it'll go in along the top, and then you'll have to pull this part down while you're pushing in. And you'll feel the bottom latch in. And from there, you just have to push the rest of the clips in, and it should be all good.